I understand Alice Parker is amazing, but but I don't really understand why Alice Parker is amazing. So maybe you can. It's sort of one of those I can take it for granted that so many musicians that I know who I super well respect are in love with Alice Parker, but I guess I haven't had enough of an exposure to really know. So
Right, right. Well, there's much to say about that, and I think it's because Alice Parker is best known as a person and not as a name. She has some very good books, but I think the first thing that like most people, the first knowledge of Alice was as a composer, singing her music, singing her arrangements and her compositions. And that's how I first fell in love with Alice Parker because her music stood out to me in a unique way. Um, let's just take her choral arrangements, which are so widely performed. They have a kind of perfection to them that is pure. Her music always struck me as devoid of sentimentality. They're not technical compositions. Like she's not some contrapuntalist, though she's classically trained. She's certainly competent, but she never has these flashes of compositional technique where you say, "Wow, now that is a composer." Rather, what she always has done was present music lovingly as something to be received, and she does that so uniquely. Her arrangements, to me, which are the model for so many, are the example because with so many arrangers, what what you're given is the technique of a composer or an arranger, and the song that they're arranging, the music, gets buried underneath it. And so, with corny modulations or with flashy overwrought counterpoint or with accompaniments that are so so designed to highlight the composer that
mhm.
the music gets lost. And Alice Parker never does that. Her arrangements always are more like a loving curation of a song that ought to be heard. And I love that about her music. But when I got to know her at some point because she was invited to Lee and I got to interview her, but then we had her for dinner, and that was the first time I really got to know her. Was Cameron LaBar, whom you know, I think. Yeah,
Mhm.
Cameron LaBar and Susan LaBar, editor of Walton Music. Cameron, the choral director at Missouri State University, and a former colleague of mine, a good friend. We had Alice over to our house to have a dinner like we love to do in our dining room. And there's my wife Evangeline and me and Alice and Cameron and Susan, and we had a wonderful dinner with great human conversation and laughter. And then, of course, because for us it's as natural as eating, we began singing together and we got out hymnals and we sang through hymns. And then Alice Parker has written a hymnal. It's the Melodious Accord hymnal, which is mostly just uh, manageable versions of all her favorite arrangements. And but like uh, so we had that out and we got that out and we began singing and we sang, and at that point Alice was already well into her 80s. She might have been 90, I'm not sure. She might have been 80s, late 80s, but she was a mature woman. And uh and we got late into the night, and it was not Alice, it was Cameron who said, "Alice, we got to go to bed." Because music and singing just energized her, and that was a formative memory, because of the humanity of just singing together around a table with her, and having conversation and eating together. It's all one of the same. It's all of a piece, and so that's a good memory. But your that desire to know Alice better, but not have now that she's deceased, it's particularly difficult to know her. So Cameron and I, we knew that, and there are a few people that got to go to her house to do composition workshops or conducting workshops or song leading workshops. But that's so few people that have that opportunity. I had the opportunity to do one of her composition workshops, and it was wonderful, a delightful experience because of its humanity and the way she teaches. Um, but not
Eric
every
did
day.
as well. The guy who brought me down to Charleston,
Yes?
Eric Wise, he also did one of those workshops. But when I asked him what was so great about it, his answer was like, "Oh, it was great. We sang, and it was beautiful,
Right.
and we had time together." And I'm like, "This doesn't tell me anything."
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right, because you don't get connected to it. And that was the problem that Cameron and I had noticed, is that, boy, it's very hard to describe it. So we thought the best thing we could do was to try in some way to recreate the experience for people. And so we decided, we got some funding from GIA. I say we, I think Dr. Labar did most of the heavy lifting on this. Got some funding from GIA to get a cameraman and the two of us to go and do an extended 3-day interview at her house. You know, hours and hours and hours of footage and audio recording and video recording of just conversation and music.
Hmm.
And we transcribed it and edited it lightly, edited it enough to make it readable, but we edited it into a book which is called uh, which is called subtitled "Conversations with Alice Parker." The Melodic Voice. That's what it's called. The Melodic Voice: Conversations with Alice Parker, and it's in an interview format, edited so that it's readable. You know, we did 3 days of interviews, but really trying to keep faithful to the conversational manner. So we left in some of her wit, and you know, but but and it comes with footage, but we intended that to be some approximation. So the real way to try to catch it is just to read that book as though you're there at the table having a conversation. Because Alice
Okay.
is kind of like an Emily Dickinson of music. You know, she's this figure that you almost have to go to her home to really to really know her. Uh, though her books are wonderful, her music's wonderful, her recordings are good. You know, but she's influenced so many people. Yeah.
And you've arranged a bunch of spirituals and stuff like Beautiful Morning, I think is super well known
So
that you've done. Is
I've done
that
some, and most of them have her DNA in there too. Though I'm a different composer, and I'm a contrapuntalist. um, but uh, but
so what about those arrangements would be inspired from her and what about it would be your particular voice?
well, I'll take one as an example, and it's one of the first I did after getting to know her. Um, and it's Look Up, Look Down, That Lonesome Road.
Mhm.
Look up, look down. And the real trick there was to suppress compositional technique in the sense of, you know, you can take a simple thing and you can compose the guts out of it. If that's not a real verb, but the tune itself is a kind of gem. It's in Mixolydian mode. So you're dealing with this flat 7. It's so austere, it only has a few notes, a fifth, and then rising to the flat 7, and then back to the fifth until it descends with very little space, very little motivic material. So the goal is, what can the temptation for most arrangers would be, all right, well, I can harmonize that. I'm going to get some real clever harmonies in there and some surprising chords and add some rich, which is fine. That's its own thing, but that's burying the tune, not curating it. And the goal is to lift up the tune lovingly, let the composer be kind of an art curator and show you a song that some anonymous person sang. And so drawing the material entirely from the tune without harmonizing it, letting the tune itself. And so Look Up, Look Down would be an example of how Alice Parker very much influenced my thinking about what to do with a tune.
Okay. Were you about to say something else?
Only that I haven't actually done very many, partly because arranging, that's a lot of work, but it's also, I also like to, I do like to,
Write your own
compose
stuff.
write my own things and write counterpoint and dense technique and 20th century things. So, and I do like harmony. So if I'm going to lovingly curate things, it actually limits me in ways that I don't always love to be limited.
It does beg the question, though, like, just speaking of arranging and that sort of thing. It does seem a lot of the spiritual arrangements that I've heard, just to put it frankly, I hate them. It takes something that's like a black spiritual that is supposed to have soul and angst and, you know, and then it's just kind of banal, you know? So I don't know how to I suppose some of the Moses Hogan is good
Mm,
and fine,
Rearrange.
but it's those are probably some of the only arrangements I've heard that I didn't just automatically despise. And so, what advice might you have out there for people who, because for example, there are a ton of Gullah spirituals that are native to the Low Country, to Charleston. There's the question of should you sing them in Gullah, which I think immediately comes across weird to people, like if you have like a white choir singing Gullah spirituals in Gullah.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a pretty good argument to be made, like, well, they were sung in Gullah, so you should sing them in Gullah, you know?
Right.
But
Then
if you were to take a Gullah spiritual, what would your approach be, or what would be some good parameters you could give to people who might want to arrange some spirituals like that?
that is a difficult, challenging question that any arranger of songs that have a particular um, dialect to them has to face. Do you say soon will be done, and what are you going to do? You're going to spell it out to try to insist that the choir adopt a pretense of a dialect, or do you let the conductor try to coach them in it, or do you say, I have no idea what kind of choir is going to sing this. I'm just going to present it as authentically as I can. But then you have the problem of what in the world does authentic mean in this context? There's all kinds of conundrums that every composer is going to have to just come up with some parameters, but always in the context of love. Uh, I don't mean that in a corny way. I mean loving as in uh, love the song. Don't arrange it if you don't love it. But if you love it, love its background. If you love its background, as far as you can understand, love the people who sang it. Be fascinated, be humble. Um,
Mm.
and, Alice would, if she was going to arrange something, if she had the time, she would just let the song, step one, you memorize the song. I can't believe how many arrangers skip the fundamental step of learning the song they're arranging, especially student. They just want to get right to it. So they start harmonizing. But what they need to do is memorize the whole song, research it down to its core. And Alice would spend lots of time, and she would sing the song to herself for months, months before she even dared to try to do something with it. Because then the
Wow.
song actually kind of starts presenting itself to you. It sounds a little corny or it sounds hokey, but it's true. Memorize the song and sing it to yourself, sing it with other people, sing it in context if it's a real song. But yeah, I'd say in the context of love means that the song, you have to understand a song if you're going to arrange it. Now I'm talking about a kind of art arranging. I'm not talking about business arranging where, I mean, there's no time for that. If you're in the business of arranging, you got to get stuff out there, and that's true. And a lot of publishers and a lot of churches, of course, that's the business. And so I'm not really speaking to that angle, where, hey, let's get it out there, let's sell some octavos and get some recordings, and that's a different conception. I'm talking about a different sort of thing here. But yeah, that would be some advice I'd give. Start with love and then you're going to have to set for yourself parameters. What are you going to do? what is meant by authentic.
Mm.
Um, but it's not authentic already, because you yourself, if you're arranging anything that's outside of your own experience, um, well, there is a kind of breaking of authenticity, which of course we know in recent years people have strongly objected to. I don't. I think that's a mistake to somehow limit yourself, for fear of rude appropriation. People have begun to limit themselves to things only in their immediate experience. I think that's a mistake. I think if you start with love, um, and you avoid, and as best as you can, you avoid harming. You avoid ru- uh, what's a word beyond rude, but more than
Offending.
rude.
Yeah.
Offending is tricky because that depends on somebody else's perception. I don't know. You can be good and offend people. Jesus was terribly offensive, and they shouldn't have been offended at him. For which
Fair
of my
enough.
for which of my good deeds are you offended? But
No, but I love this philosophy with it, like to love. I mean, a couple things with regards to that. Like I have a architectural design friend, and he said you should never innovate to innovate. Almost all bad art comes from innovation for innovation's sake. You want to innovate, you just love two things really well, and you will naturally create something new. You love Japanese architecture and American colonial architecture, and you're just obsessed with both of them. And then you don't try to innovate, and you'll naturally create something that's uniquely you, and people will love it. You know?
that is an excellent thought. Uh, and it also it forestalls this kind of. Uh, I remember one of my professors told in doctoral days was bemoaning a kind of collage art that is simplistic, which is innovate for innovate, which is saying, hey, I need to do something new, so I'm going to smash two things together and see what happens. But he was admiring certain composers who would do that. I'm blanking on the name. Great American composer, string quartet. I won a Pulitzer Prize, and he was sort of a master at classical. Um, oh, it'll come to me, and I don't know why I'm forgetting it. But but yes,
Not Elliot Carter.
no, but
No.
same ballpark. I mean, you're in the ballpark. Uh,
Pearl.
no. Uh, it'll have to just appear.
But it's like with Messiaen. I mean, no one thinks that he destroyed Indian classical music, you know? And you don't get the sense of he's just whatever appropriation means, that that's what he's trying to do when he's literally appropriating all these like rhythmic techniques from India. But you get the sense like he really loved all the rhythmic permutations that there were in North Indian classical music, and then it just came out in the music that he wrote. It's not like he was trying to smash. It's like he loved two things, and then it just became him.
I don't know how to live as a human being except to be curious, and in curiosity be fascinated, and in fascination find love in it, and love to be myself changed. And if my composition is going to be myself, it's going to involve the things that have changed me, whether they come from my immediate culture or not. But that's a far cry from the just complaints of people who uh, exoticize others, and then truly appropriate in a comic or a cartoonish way, appropriate certain things, and then
Exploitative.
exploit it and then they gain from it. And meanwhile, what's left behind is an actual culture or an art that has now been in, if it goes well, what's popularized is the cartoon version. Meanwhile, the true culture or art is left unloved, and that's what's wrong. But I don't think that's what we're talking about here.
And that works with your paradigm because like you don't do that if you come at it with love.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a great way. It's like you have your own style and you take a Gullah spiritual and suddenly you make electroacoustic music with a
Right.
a polyrhythmic drum beat to it, but it's influenced by Gullah spiritual, but it came out of love. It's like, do your thing. Or
And
so.
the I suppose the accounting of it would look something like this. If you were to find out, it would be when people come to know this. Do they come to love the Gola song that you're arranging, and do they come to want to know more about it and to learn? Well, then maybe it's been good. But on the other hand, if they come to a poor understanding and a false caricature, then it's artistic dishonesty, which I believe in.
Hmm.
Your friend's idea that don't innovate for the sake of innovation reminds me of a Wendell Berry uh, saying from Life is a Miracle, which is a wonderful book. I love it. But he says he says we need to prize familiarity above innovation,
Hmm.
because innovation is always going to be, and I'm paraphrasing at this point, innovation is always going to be limited by our fallenness and our own limits. We can only innovate to the extent that we are ourselves limited. But familiarity is as limitless as life itself,
Hmm.
because life, any small thing or anything that you become fascinated with and love is going to draw you ever in, and it's not going to be exhausted. The smallest things, you love a certain flower, you can learn to become more and more familiar with that flower, and it will not end, because that limitation is not yours. It's the limitation of life and creation. And since God is unlimited, becoming familiar with what God, and now I'm way beyond Wendell Berry, but becoming familiar with God has made is limitless. And that inspires me.
Hello, everyone. Would you please consider supporting me on Patreon? I'm really enjoying making this podcast as a means of having interesting conversations with people in the arts and those who are interested in promoting beauty, especially in the liturgical arts. But I'm also doing this as a means of trying to help support my family. So if you would prayerfully consider supporting me on Patreon, it would mean the world to me. The first 20 people in the United States who sign up at any financial level, be that the $5 level or above, will get a free copy of my CD, Bach's Organ Mass, recorded on the Trost organ in Waltershausen. Thank you for your support.